Hello again. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is we are going to be talking about proteins. And so that is going to be the title of our notes today. And I know that you have heard about proteins before because we talk a lot about proteins when we're talking about food. And so when you think about proteins, you probably think of something like chicken or cheese, those type of things. But what I want to explain to you today is that proteins are what your cells are making all the time. And there are millions of different proteins in your cells, in your body, that are doing many, many thousands of different functions. Okay, so proteins are made in your cells, and these proteins have many, many different functions. And I want to point out that proteins have different functions. Let's write that down. Proteins have many functions because there are many different proteins. And there is a direct relationship between what the protein looks like and what it does. So there's this relationship between structure and function. Okay, so we're going to write that down. There is a relationship between the structure of the protein and its function. Okay, and so depending on what that particular protein does, determines what it's going to look like. Okay, so to drive home this point, I'd like to show you a picture. Okay, so here is a picture of a tool, and probably you don't have one of these in your garage, but by looking at this tool, you can maybe decide what the tool maybe does. Okay, so looking at that tool, it has a very specific shape, and based on the shape of the tool, you can maybe come up with some ideas about what it actually is for. And so you can see that there's a handle, and so the handle probably is somewhere where you're going to grab with your hand, and then on the other end of it, there's a hook, so it probably has to hook into something, right? Maybe it's a weapon for zombies, so when the zombie apocalypse comes, you could just go around and kill a bunch of zombies, right? Um, or what it actually is for is called a hay hook, and it's used to move around big bushels of hay. And so here is a picture of this hay hook actually being used by a farmer. So here's a farmer, and she has two hay hooks. And what you do with these is you grab the handles, you stick them in the hay, and now you can move this very heavy and awkward piece of hay. And so the point of me showing you that is the same is true for protein. Each protein has a very specific shape, and that shape is like that because of the function of the protein. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to show you several examples, and we're going to look at each example of a protein and look at the shape and the function of each one. Okay, so the first example, this is going to be example number one. Let's see here. So that, hold on, let me make that a little bit clearer. So example number one. Okay, let me pull up a picture. So let me show you an example of a protein. And like I said, there are millions of different proteins, okay? So I'm just gonna show you like 3 or 4, just to give you an idea. Okay, so here is example number one. This is a protein, and this protein is called an antibody. And I know you have heard of antibodies, especially lately, ever since our coronavirus pandemic. There's been a lot of talk about antibodies and taking a vaccine and getting some antibodies up in your body to fight off the coronavirus. So this is an antibody, and it is a protein, okay? And it circulates around in your body, and it has a very specific shape, and it has this Y shape, okay? And so this Y shape has these two, what I like to call arms, and on the ends of the arms there are these like hands that grab a very specific thing. Okay, and so on the tip here there are very specific binding sites that grab a very specific thing. This thing is called an antigen. Antigen just means anything. Okay, there are millions of different antigens in the world, and you have antibodies that bind to every single possible antigen in the universe. Even things that don't even exist, you have antibodies for. Okay, so I just want to write down for each of these examples, there is a shape. And for this antibody, there are two arms with two grabbers, two arms with grabbers. Okay, that's just what I'm just going to name this. Is not very scientific. So grabbers, I'm not even sure that's how you spell it, but they grab very specific antigen. Okay, grabbers that bind to a specific antigen. Okay, antigen just means thing. You have antibodies for coronavirus. Okay, and so the antibodies for coronavirus can only grab coronavirus. Okay, the function of the antibody is this. It binds to an antigen, for example, the coronavirus, and it labels the coronavirus to be killed. So there are other cells in your immune system, for example, T cells or macrophages, that if they see something covered in antibodies, they will kill it. That is like a label that says, kill me. Okay, so the function is to label a pathogen for death. For death, okay? So for example, if you have a bacterial infection, you will have antibodies that will bind to the bacteria. Another cell is going to see antibodies attached to the bacteria and kill the bacteria. So that's how that works. But my point for this is so that you can see that this is a protein, and the protein has a shape, and the shape determines the function. The shape being it has two grabbers, and the function being it's going to stick to things. Okay, so the last thing I want to point out before I move on to the next example is this is what a protein is. And if you look really closely to this picture, it has all these little balls, okay? So the balls are the monomer of the big protein, okay? So there are little balls that make up the protein. We're going to talk about what those little balls are in a minute. Okay, example number 2. So what I'm doing is I'm just showing you an example of different proteins and their different shapes and functions. Okay, so the next example that I have for you, let's see what I have. Collagen is a good one. So this is a protein called collagen. Oops, sorry. I just wanted to get rid of this little dot here. I'm going to scoot this over. Here is collagen. So I'm going to write that here. And if you look at its shape, what does it look like to you? It looks like a rope to me. So the shape is rope-like. And if you see this picture, you can see that this is also made up of those little balls, which are the monomers, and they're twisted together in this in like a rope. And just like rope is twisted up to reinforce its strength, collagen does the same. And like rope, collagen is used to hold things together. So the function of this is to hold things together in your body. For example, your ligaments and your tendons are what hold the bone and the bone together, or the bone and the muscle together, and they are made of collagen. And so like rope, it is holding like your bones to other bones, okay? So that is the structure and the function of a example, which is collagen. Okay, let me show you a third example. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one. This is an example of a protein. And like I said, there are so many different proteins. I would be here like for months if I were to explain all of them. I'm just giving you a few examples. This is a protein that is called hemoglobin. You have probably heard that before. This is example number 3, hemoglobin. And you can see that this is also made up of those little balls, which are called monomers, which I'm going to explain those in a minute. And it's a little bit hard to see this, but it is made of 4 sections. Okay, there's a gray section, a red section, a light blue, and a dark blue. And each of these sections has a little pocket, and in the pocket is an iron atom. Okay, you can't see that, but that's what's happening. So I'm going to say the shape has 4 sections with a pocket. Okay, so a little hole with a pocket containing iron. Okay, iron on the periodic table is Fe. And iron binds to oxygen. They bind together. So hemoglobin is what is found in your red blood cells. It has this round shape with 4 different sections with an iron atom in the middle, and the iron binds to oxygen. And the function of hemoglobin, as you probably know, is in your blood, and it goes to your lungs, and each of those 4 irons will bind to an oxygen that you're inhaling through your lungs, and is taking oxygen to the rest of your body. So it is an oxygen carrier. So I'm going to write that. The function is to carry 4 oxygen atoms. Okay, and what it does is it picks it up in the lungs, takes it to the rest of your body, drops it off to all the cells, and then picks it back up, drops it off, picks it back up, drops it off. That's all it does all day long, 24 hours a day. Okay, so that is a function of hemoglobin. Okay, so I'm going to show you another example. This is going to be the last example. Let's see here. Okay. This example is a little bit more complicated, but it's very important. Okay, so I want to introduce this to you. This is a protein. And what I want to introduce to you is this idea of an enzyme. Okay, so this is my example number 4. And that is an enzyme. And most of the proteins that you make in your cells are enzymes, okay? And it's probably the most popular protein in your whole body for all living organisms. And what an enzyme does is an enzyme performs chemical reactions. So in a previous video, I talked about there are 2 types of chemical reactions. There are the chemical reactions where you have 2 pieces and you stick them together through a dehydration reaction, or you have 1 piece and you rip them apart through a hydrolysis reaction. Enzymes are a protein that do these chemical reactions. Okay, these chemical reactions don't just randomly occur. An enzyme facilitates these reactions. So an enzyme is like a little machine that actually performs these chemical reactions. So I just want to write that. I'm going to write the function first because I just explained it. So the function for an enzyme is to perform chemical reactions. Oops. Chemical reactions. This is very, very important. If you did not have enzymes, you would never have any chemical reactions happen in your cells, and you would die. Okay, so the shape of an enzyme is very specific. And what I want to point out is that the shape is that it will have a little pocket that fits the pieces that are in the chemical reaction. Okay, these pockets are called active sites. The pieces are called substrate. Okay, this right here is an enzyme. It's got this crazy shape. I will talk about this enzyme in the future, but it is called ATP synthase. Okay, let me scoot up here. So let me just write some things down before I go into this specific enzyme. But the shape, it has specific pockets. Okay, these pockets are called active sites that hold the substrates in a chemical reaction. In a I'm just going to shorten this because I'm out of room. Reaction is sometimes written like that, RXN. Okay, so for example, let me just say that if I have an enzyme that is going to take 2 pieces and make them into one, it's going to have a shape like this. Okay, this is just a cartoon shape. real proteins look like this. They're made of those little balls, but this is a cartoon shape. So one enzyme could have a shape like this where it holds one substrate here and one substrate here. And then what it's going to do is it's going to do the chemical reaction. So here's the enzyme. Oops. And it's going to combine those two substrates together to make one bigger piece. Okay, so it's two pieces, brings them together to make one big piece. That's what enzymes do. These little holes that hold the substrate are called active sites. Okay, let me just fill these in just to make it look better. Okay, so or an enzyme could do the opposite reaction where it takes one piece and then rips them apart. Okay, and it just has like one hole for the one piece and then it rips them apart. So this specific enzyme here is called ATP synthase. I'm just going to write this down. You do not have to know this, but you will later. Okay, ATP synthase is the name of this enzyme that I'm showing here, this red one. And what it does is it takes one molecule called ADP and it grabs another molecule called P, which is phosphate, and it's going to make a bigger molecule called ATP. Okay, that's where the name comes from. ATP is the molecule it's making. Synthase means like to synthesize or to build. So that's what this protein is doing. I just want to point out that all enzymes are protein and all chemical reactions happen because of enzymes. So it's a very important protein that your cells make all the time. Okay, so that's for the examples. So what I would like to now point out is that proteins are made of these monomers. These monomers are called amino acids. So I'm going to put amino acids are the monomers that proteins are made of. That proteins are made of. And I want to point out that in those pictures of those proteins, those little balls are the amino acids. You have probably heard the word amino acid before. So they are what makes up all proteins, okay? There are 20 different types of amino acids. 20 different types of amino acids. And your body can make some of them, but not all of them. Okay, so monomers are amino acids. That's what proteins are made of. There are 20 different kinds. And like I said, your body can make some of them, but your body can't make all of them. So this is why you have to eat protein, because you have to get those amino acids that you cannot make on your own through food. Those are called essential amino acids, which is why you have to eat protein or you die. Because if you don't have all 20 amino acids available to make your own protein, you can't make protein, you can't make enzymes, you can't do chemical reactions, you can't carry oxygen, all the things that your body needs to do. Okay, so there are 20 different amino acids. So I would like to point out that when a protein is made, what happens is you have like one amino acid that binds to another amino acid, and I'm just drawing them as circles right now. I will show you the specific structure in a second. But let's say these are different amino acids, and each amino acid is bound to each other. Okay, so when a protein is made, you make a long string of amino acids. This long string is called a polypeptide chain. So I'm going to say polypeptide chain is the same thing as a protein. Okay, it's just another way of saying protein. And the bonds between the amino acid are called peptide bonds. Peptide bonds are the bonds that connect each amino acid to each other. Peptide bonds are the bonds between the amino acids, okay? And what happens is you have this long chain. Each amino acid has a certain property, and the chain will then fold up into its specific shape, like the shapes we saw earlier. Okay, so I'm going to write this down. The chain will fold up. The chain will fold up into a three-dimensional shape. Will fold up into a 3D shape, depending on what the function is, depending on what the protein is, okay? So that it can do its function. Okay, so for example, the antibody has that Y shape, but first it's going to make the long chain of amino acids and then it folds up into that Y shape. Okay, and now it can be an antibody and do its job. Same is true for the collagen. First it makes a long string and then it twists itself up into a rope shape. Same with the hemoglobin. It's going to make a long chain and then it's going to get into that ball configuration so that it can carry oxygen and so on. Okay, so that's how proteins are made. Okay, so what I want to do for the end of this video is I want to talk about the structure of each amino acid. Okay, so the structure of an amino acid. So each amino acid, we've been just showing them as like a little ball so far, but they each have a similar structure. Let me rewrite that. Okay, so this is the structure found for each amino acid. First of all, each one has a carbon in the middle. This is called a central carbon. And if you remember the Bohr model of a carbon, there's 4 electrons on the outside shell, which means it can bind to 4 different things, and it does. So each amino acid has one central carbon, and then it binds to 4 different things. And these are the things that it binds to, okay? The first thing is that each of the amino acids has a plain old boring hydrogen attached. So that's it. Blah, boring. Okay, but on one of the bonds, we have what is called a carboxyl group, which is a carbon, an oxygen, and a hydrogen. Sometimes the hydrogen comes off, but it comes back on, comes off, comes back on. This is called a carboxyl group. Okay, so I'm going to write this down. Carboxyl group. Okay, all amino acids have a carboxyl group. On the other side, we have what is called an amino group. So it's NH2. Okay, this is called an amino group, and this is where the name amino acid comes from. Okay, and then on the bottom, this last section is called an R, and this R is different for each of the amino acids. There are 20 different amino acids, which means there are 20 different R groups. Okay, so I'm just going to put this as a variable group. Variable, it varies depending on which amino acid you're talking about. So this is the plain structure of each amino acid. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture of all 20 amino acids. And if you ever take a biochemistry class, then you're going to have to memorize all 20 of these, which is actually not that bad. Okay, so here is what all 20 amino acids look like. And so just to show you this table, not all amino acid tables look like this, but these are the 20, okay? And so I'm just going to start with this one in the top left. Is called glycine. And so you can see that there's a central carbon in the middle, the hydrogen attached. This is the carboxyl group, which is COOH, and then this is the amino group on the left. Then in the bottom, in the yellow box, is just a plain hydrogen. That's what glycine's R group is just plain hydrogen. This next one is called alanine, which has a central carbon, a hydrogen, a carboxyl group, amino group, and then the R group is CH3. Valine's R group has 3 carbons. Cytosine has a sulfur in there and a carbon. And so, let's see here. Let me just close that. Okay, so all of these in the yellow are glycine, alanine, valine, cytosine, proline. And these are all considered non-polar. That is a property of those amino acids. Okay, then here are the polar amino acids, and you can see there's serine, threonine, tyrosine, asparagine, glutamine. And then there are positively charged amino acids and negatively charged amino acids. So these are all 20, and each one has a specific property. Okay, and these properties are very important, and this is why. So let's say, for example, we have a string of amino acids, and let me just redo that one. Okay, and each one is attached to each other through a peptide bond. And let's say this one here has a positive charge, okay? So what that means is that it's going to be attracted to a negatively charged amino acid. So let's say, for example, this long string folds up and this positively charged amino acid is going to be attracted to this negatively charged one. Okay, and so it'll fold up because of that. And then let's say, for example, this is just an example. I'm going to make this string longer. Let's say these are bound together. Let's say this is a positively charged amino acid and this is positively charged. And so the same charges repel each other. So because this is positive and this is positive, they are going to go away from each other and these two are going to come together. And so when a protein is being made, this is part of the directions is having these different properties so that it will automatically fold up into the shape it needs to be in. So that is how proteins are made. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you're having a great day and I will see you next time.